Thank you for being with us tonight. Next Sunday night, TV3 presents George Papard, starring in 5 Days from Home. We hope you'll join us then. The following on tape.
From ABC News, this is the Weekend Report. Now from our Washington headquarters, substituting for Tom Jarrell, here's Brit Hume.
Good evening. In the Middle East today, things seem to be getting better and worse at the same time. In a small town near Tel Aviv, Israeli and Lebanese negotiators came to terms on the text of a U.S.-sponsored agreement for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Lebanon. At the same time, though, Israel said it won't honor the agreement until Syrian troops leave first. And in Syria, Yasser Arafat, leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization, called for a new war against Israel, the only way, he said, to redraw the political map of the Mideast. We have two reports, beginning with John Donvan in Tel Aviv.
The accord reached here today could well be historic if it ever works. The Israelis have reached agreement to end the state of war with another Arab country, while the Lebanese have made a deal to get Israeli troops on their soil to go back across the border to Israel. The problem may be the Syrians, who are not here negotiating, and also an unshakable Israeli demand. As Israeli officials left today's final round, they knew that Syria had already denounced today's agreement, but they reiterated Israeli forces will not leave Lebanon unless the Syrians also go. The Israelis say that the next move is Syria's, that the Syrian leadership must decide to pull its troops out of Lebanon so that Israeli troops can also come back home. The question is whether the agreement that was completed here today contains anything that the Syrians will go along with. But when Israel's cabinet met today, ministers did not announce any deadline for the Syrian decision. And as though the Israelis are expecting all to work out, they're looking forward to signing the agreement with Lebanon in an official ceremony, probably on Tuesday. John Donvan, ABC News, Netanya, Israel.
Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, a place one Western diplomat calls a killing ground, has only two roads out for the Syrian and Palestinian forces occupying its northern two-thirds. Yet it is here that the war PLO chairman Yasser Arafat says is the only hope of altering the Middle East power balance would begin. Half of Syria's estimated 40,000 troops in Lebanon are in the Bekaa, even if its Air Force and SAM-5 missiles are safely across the border in Syria. Palestinian guerrillas, Lebanese leftist militias, and a few hundred Iranian troops are also in the valley, facing the Israelis to the south. Syria has said it will not launch a war against Israel, but the Syrian foreign minister told a Gulf newspaper that Syria can count on Saudi Arabia's military and financial support if war comes. And the Syrian president, Hafez al-Assad, is openly supporting Lebanese groups opposed to their government's troop withdrawal agreement with Israel, causing fears a new Lebanese civil war could erupt. The Palestinians and Syrians are playing a dangerous game. Israel still has a superior fighting machine, and it could be provoked by attacks on its front lines, whether from Syrians or Palestinians. And no one here can be certain that the change in the balance of power will be the one Yasser Arafat wants. Charles Glass, ABC News, Damascus.
China's government announced today it has convicted Liu Chung-sun, a prominent Hong Kong newspaper editor, after he allegedly admitted to being a spy for the U.S. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. It was the first such conviction since diplomatic relations between the two countries were normalized 4 years ago. So far, no comment from the U.S. Senate Finance Chairman Bob Dole called on President Reagan today to get involved in breaking the stalemate over taxes and the federal deficit that has brought the congressional budget process to a standstill in the Senate. The deadlock is the result of a heated economic debate that was much in evidence on the Sunday news talk shows. Shelia Cast reports.
The debate centers on how fragile the economic recovery is and which would damage it more, very high deficits or tax increases to curb those deficits. On ABC's This Week with David Brinkley, two economists with sharply differing viewpoints, a liberal and a supply-sider, agreed that taxes pose the bigger immediate risk.
If you're sitting here with 10, 11% unemployment rates, then it's not an appropriate thing to be raising taxes in that kind of a context.
Well, I think Les Thoreau is perfectly correct on that. You never raise taxes in a deep recession or depression.
But economist Henry Kaufman, whose frequently pessimistic views are given great weight on Wall Street, said big deficits might pose a threat sooner.
I would take the risk at this point in time to at least cut half of the tax cut coming July 1. I would remove the indexation of the tax system.
And Democratic congressmen also called for tax increases.
We think you've got to tax to raise the money to spend for government programs rather than borrowing and spending, which is what apparently the president wants to do.
Gephardt and other House Democrats are determined to undo as much as they can of the president's tax cuts. But Senate Republican leaders are resolved to protect the president's program. That's why Congress is having so much trouble passing a budget resolution and may end up unable to do so. Shelia Cast, ABC News on Capitol Hill.
The shaky economy has benefited a once embattled institution, the Reserve Officers Training Corps. In the early 70s, ROTC was the object of scorn on most college campuses, but the economy was booming then, and opposition to the Vietnam War was at its peak. As Bob Berkowitz reports, today's college students are more patriotic and in greater need of financial help.
UCLA, 1970, a massive demonstration against the Reserve Officer Training Corps. 1983, same campus, same location. The demonstrators are long gone, but ROTC remains. The same is true at 1,414 other colleges, where ROTC is bigger than ever. It was in 1973, during the height of the anti-Vietnam War movement, when ROTC enrollment plummeted to 61,279. Today, it is up 87%. ROTC's dramatic enlistment turnaround is due to a combination of students' lack of money and love of country.
It's kind of a good feeling to know that I'll have a job when I get out of college.
The federal government pays college tuition for 1/4 of all ROTC students. A full scholarship at a school like MIT can mean a savings of about $10,000 a year. In exchange, ROTC students in their sophomore year must promise the military 4 years of active duty and 2 years reserve. A decade ago, this ROTC student might have been the target of taunts in a more hostile environment, but things have changed. Even short hair is okay.
I could have it longer if I wanted, but I like it this way.
ROTC's return is not being welcomed by everybody. Critics say that college should be a place for intellectual pursuits, not war games. But because of the new sense of pragmatism and patriotism on campus, ROTC